Iran's Shaheds aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Debris is falling as those drones are ripped apart, but it's not just the US missiles and cannons that are ripping the Shaheds to shreds. A US weapon that shouldn't even exist yet is destroying Iran's weapons instantly. This is a futuristic weapon pulled straight out of a sci-fi movie. It shouldn't exist, yet it does, and it's making all of Iran's weapons obsolete. The laser war has started. Iran has no answer for it. According to the New York Post, a US Navy destroyer sailing off the coast of the Middle East has been fitted with a weapon unlike anything seen before. This isn't a missile-launching pod or a new type of gun that can rattle off thousands of rounds per minute as Iran's swarms of Shahed drones. It's something far more futuristic than that. This is some sort of control system that the Post claims is the high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance, or HELIOS. There is plenty to know about this laser system, which we'll be getting into in just a moment, but the headline is that HELIOS is a marine-based system that can be used by the US to fire laser beams at drones and other aerial targets. These lasers burn through their targets, destroying them in an instant, while proving that the US doesn't have to expend multi-million-dollar missiles to take out Iranian drones that are built at a fraction of the cost. This is a body blow to Iran's collapsing military strategy. Drones and missile launches are all that Iran has left after the US has torn through its military infrastructure so comprehensively that around 80% of the country's offensive capability has been wiped off the map, per the Institute for the Study of War. Iran has lost 60% of its missile launchers as of March 12th. About 80% of its air defenses have been obliterated, making Iran almost defenseless against the US and Israeli missiles and bombs that are flying into its territory daily. The Iranian regime needed its drones. Now the US has come up with the perfect counter. What we know about HELIOS comes from its manufacturer, Lockheed Martin. The HELIOS is essentially a pod that is mounted to a warship from which it delivers high-energy laser fire at incoming targets. These beams are at least 60 kilowatts, with Lockheed Martin stating that the destructive light is a spectral beam combined fiber laser that is capable of tearing through drone casings and dazzling the sensors and viewfinders built into those drones. There is clearly a large degree of automation at play here too. HELIOS uses proven algorithms and high-powered optics to strike its targets, which suggests that the weapon most likely tracks and attacks independently of human operation. The concept seems to be to place a HELIOS pod on a ship and then leave it to fire off lasers at anything that presents a threat from the skies. The system also comes with plenty of advantages, as Lockheed Martin pointed out back in 2021. The HELIOS system's deep magazine, low cost per kill, speed of light delivery, and precision response enables it to address fleet needs now, and its mature, scalable architecture supports increased laser power levels to counter additional threats in the future, the company declared. Translation for the marketing speak: HELIOS barely costs anything, can fire for as long as it has power, and is going to get even better in the future. The New York Post adds there can be some form of human interaction with HELIOS, most notably in terms of its steerable head. Presumably, this means that operators from inside the warship on which the HELIOS is installed can swivel the laser-firing pod in the direction of incoming targets before allowing the automated systems built into the pod itself to handle the firing of the lasers. It all seems too good to be true, or the stuff out of nightmares from the Iranian regime's perspective, but we know that it works as the tests are there to prove that HELIOS is the real deal. And the US may even have another futuristic weapon in play, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. On the testing front, Naval News reported back in early 2025 that the US Navy conducted a test using HELIOS toward the end of the previous year. That test saw the US try to strike a threat representative of a cruise missile from the deck of the USS Preble. We don't know much more than that, as the 2024 annual report from the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation that confirmed the testing of the laser weapon didn't go into many more specifics. At the very least, the US collected data on how HELIOS would do against a missile-like threat that could have been used in the further development of a system that Lockheed Martin itself has said is only going to get better with time. The Navy Times offered a slightly different spin on this 2024 annual report. It claims that the US Navy test was indeed successful, though it was conducted against a drone rather than a cruise missile-type weapon. Adding to this, the New York Post reports that the US Navy said at the beginning of February that it had also used the HELIOS in successful tests that led to the destruction of 4 drones. Returning to the Navy Times, it published a photograph, reportedly pulled directly from the report, that shows a huge streak of white light coming out of the USS Preble, which gives us an indication of how powerful this laser is. This isn't a thin beam of light like you'd see in a laser pod. It's a non-stop stream of white-hot fury being unleashed from the very types of ships that Iran is targeting with its Shahed drones. So it seems clear that Helios works, and according to the New York Post, it has been unleashed on Iran's Shahed swarms. But there are two caveats to this story. The first is that the US hasn't provided any official confirmation that Helios is indeed in play in Iran. What we have so far are photographs of what appears to be a Helios system installed on a US Navy destroyer, along with scattered reports about the laser weapons used. As for the second caveat, it's also possible that Helios has either been misidentified or it's been joined by another laser weapon that doubles up on the futuristic firepower that the US is bringing into Iran. What is that weapon? We'll tell you everything in a moment. But while we're on this, you are watching The Military Show. If this is the kind of insight and reporting that you want to see more of, make sure you're subscribed. We break it down like this every single week. As for the other weapon, it's ODIN. On March 13th, the New York Times reported that suggestions that Helios is on board a warship near Iran may be erroneous. The outlet quotes Jared Keller, who is the author of the Laser Wars newsletter, who claims that the laser pod seen in the photo shared by the New York Post is actually ODIN rather than Helios. If that's the case, we have to look at what the US is firing from its ships in a different light. Pun only slightly intended. ODIN isn't an outright drone killer like Helios, though it is still a laser weapon. ODIN differs in that the beam it fires is designed to disorient incoming drones rather than destroy them outright. The idea seems to be to send these drones off course, leading them to crash away from their targets. Presumably, a disoriented drone may also be forced to slow down, making it easier prey for other weapons such as cannons and missiles. Army Recognition reported on March 2nd that imagery that emerged from the first day of Operation Epic Fury suggests ODIN has been deployed. The footage, which comes from US Central Command and was published on February 28, shows a US Arleigh Burke-class destroyer launching Tomahawk missiles at a target. But what is easy to miss in the same footage is that what appears to be an ODIN laser system was deployed during that strike, seemingly in a supporting role for the Tomahawk. The ODIN can be seen with a close examination of the footage, the outlet reports, and it shares the same photographs that the New York Post provided when claiming that the Helios is on board a US warship. This changes everything in terms of the US using lasers to directly destroy Iran's drones. But it doesn't change much in terms of the effective use of lasers to take down the Shahed swarms. We mentioned earlier that ODIN isn't a hard-kill laser system, but what it does is fire off a laser that confuses the systems, sensors, and cameras built into drones. It also has the ability to hinder manned aerial systems, as the laser can create a glare in a pilot's vision that, if sustained or repeated, can prevent that pilot from executing strikes or carrying out aerial maneuvers. ODIN hasn't taken long to go from concept to reality. It took just 2.5 years for the initial idea to be transformed into something that could be installed, and we know for a fact that it's deployed on the USS Dewey, per naval technology. So what the US Navy has here is a system that could force Iran's Shaheds to crash uselessly into the Persian Gulf, as well as a supporting laser that will help other operators such as US Air Force pilots to take out Shaheds that manage to remain in the air. We'd say something about ODIN also being useful against Iran's fighter pilots. However, the US and Israel have battered Iran's aging air force so badly that its fighter jets are basically a non-factor in Operation Epic Fury. There's one more possible twist in this tale. Some suggest that Israel has also entered the laser game. The New York Post reports that videos of the skies over the border between Israel and Lebanon have shown rockets being launched, only for those rockets to be destroyed seconds later. That's too fast for a missile launched by air defense systems to reach and hit their targets. Instead, these counterstrikes have been widely credited to Israel and its Iron Beam weapon, which has been designed specifically to disable rockets as part of Israel's multi-layered air defense strategy. The Iron Beam is even more powerful than Helios, as it has a 100 kilowatt laser. Specifically, the Iron Beam has 2 high-energy laser systems which are attached to an air defense radar and a command and control unit. The dual laser system is especially impressive. It's been designed to enable the Iron Beam's laser to be so powerful that it can improve performance in the atmospheric disruptions, such as rain and clouds, that can lead to a laser beam fragmenting or being sent off course. Assuming the system works as it's supposed to work, it sends a powerful beam that is roughly the diameter of a coin straight through the heart of its target. If the Iron Beam has entered the Iran war, that gives the regime up to 3 laser weapons to worry about. However, Israel says that the Iron Beam is a non-factor, at least so far. According to the Jerusalem Post, the IDF says that the Iron Beam hasn't been used in the war with Iran, and that it isn't ready for regular use at all. But doubts could be raised about that claim, given that various versions of the Iron Beam were used to shoot down 40 of Hezbollah's drones back in the fall of 2024, suggesting that Israel's technology does indeed work. Perhaps an upgrade was underway that has taken the latest version of the Iron Beam out of commission, or Israel may be hiding its use of its new laser weapon. preferring to keep it as something that it can use to ambush Iranian missiles and drones without Iran's regime knowing that it's in the fight. We simply don't know, but speculation is running rampant. And as if it couldn't get any worse for Iran, the US and its use of futuristic technology doesn't end with lasers that are dazzling and destroying drones. The space war has been ignited along with the laser war, and this is another part of the fight in which Iran simply can't compete. The future of warfare is here, and we'll be covering why that is toward the end of the video. First, US President Donald Trump made an interesting claim a few days into Operation Epic Fury. He claimed that the US military and IDF have the ability to strike against an Iranian missile launch site within 4 minutes of a launching taking place. How can that even be possible? The Allied forces have shattered Iran's missile capabilities to such an extent that launches are becoming less frequent and are being made using launchers that are wheeled out, used, and then hidden again as quickly as Iran can manage. For strikes against these launchers to be happening just 4 minutes after they're used, the US would need a way to instantly identify where those launchers are. It has one, and it's being deployed by the US Space Force. That's according to the New York Post, which spoke to the former professor of the Space Force program at Johns Hopkins University, Brent David Ziarnik. The US can locate the missile launcher sites with satellites that have infrared sensors for finding where rockets are being fired. He adds that this capability is also useful from a defensive standpoint, noting, "They can spot the missiles and pinpoint where the launchers are. The missiles can be intercepted and destroyed, often with Patriot missiles. Field forces get notified an attack is coming, so they can go to shelters or bunkers." Hundreds of Iranian missiles have already been destroyed using this very technology, as the heat that they generate is instantly tracked, allowing for air defense missiles to be sent their way, the Post says. It's certainly within the realms of possibility that the US is also using this technology to scan for bursts of infrared energy on Iranian soil, which are a dead giveaway of a missile launch that can lead to the US sending in the jets or firing standoff munitions at the new target almost as soon as the Iranian launch is completed. Ziarnik doesn't mention which space-bound system the US is using for these purposes. However, Sky Defender may be a good guess. The technology features ground-based radar that supports space domain awareness, in addition to working in conjunction with Thales Alenia Space to detect missile threats. Satellites orbiting the Earth are equipped with infrared sensors used to detect missile launches. Information about where the missile was launched from can even be delivered before the missile itself shows up on other ground-based radars, and it seems that artificial intelligence is being used to enhance the entire system. Essentially, the US operators on the ground are getting information from infrared detecting satellites, which they can use, seemingly with the help of AI, to triangulate Iran's missile launch positions. Once the location is found, the US attacks, and just like that, another launch site is wiped off the map within minutes. What all of this amounts to is a very simple fact for Iran. The laser wars have begun, with the space wars being thrown on top, and none of the weapons that Iran has even come close to competing with what the US is bringing to Operation Epic Fury. In particular, the ODIN and HELIOS lasers may have given us a glimpse into the future of anti-drone combat. What was once a dream for weapons manufacturers is being turned into a technology that is not only proving itself viable, but is actively preventing Iran's Shahed drones from doing the thing that Iran needs them to do, which is score enough hits against US targets, convince the Trump administration that continuing Operation Epic Fury may be more trouble than it's worth. Lasers can fire much quicker than even the fastest missile, and on the cost front, they are far more efficient to use than the expensive missiles that the US has used in the past to deal with Iran's drones. Those missiles are still in play, of course, but as the US laser technology gets better, it will almost inevitably overtake missiles as the anti-drone weapon of choice. How could it not? The New York Times says that shooting a laser can cost as little as $3.50 per shot, but a single Patriot interceptor missile sets the US back over $3 million. In other words, laser weapons like Helios will be able to take out over 850,000 Shahed drones before the US absorbs the same cost as it does from a single Patriot. The math says it all. We are looking at the future of anti-drone warfare, and the US is pioneering it in Iran right now. If more Helios and Odin systems are deployed, along with Israel getting its Iron Beam operational again, Iran's entire drone-based strategy, at least when it comes to hitting US ships and Israel itself, will disappear. Iran is dependent on its Shaheds. It had launched 2,100 of them between the beginning of Operation Epic Fury and March 11th, per RBC Ukraine. If Iran's low-cost drones are now being taken out by laser weapons that cost even less to use, then what was once a cost-effective strategy of sending out swarms to waste multiple millions of dollars of US firepower will go up in smoke. Just like the Shaheds when Helios hits them. In about 2 weeks, we've watched the US change the air combat game forever. Lasers and infrared detecting satellites are enabling the US to achieve air superiority and providing it with the defensive measures it needs to minimize Iran's increasingly limited airstrikes. But this is far from the first time that the US has changed air combat forever. Back in the 1950s, the US unleashed a weapon that flipped air combat on its head. Find out what that weapon was and why it's as important now as it has ever been in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the craziest weapons that the US is using in Iran. And thank you as always for watching.